I'm Rabbi Jeremy from Mahar, and welcome to our second Torah Roundup video for August 2020. This one will cover Parshat Eikev. Eikev is a little bit shorter of a read than the prior Parshat Va'etchanan. It covers fewer specific subjects with a little bit more repetition. So it covers the reminders about not engaging in idolatry and tearing down idols when you come into the land. It reminds, commit idolatry and bad things will happen, follow the commandments and good things will happen. It restates a rationale that we didn't talk about last week. And the rationale that we didn't talk about in the prior Torah portion was this: you shouldn't be like the other nations. And we're going to see that rationale more as we move through Deuteronomy. It's important here, it's mentioned here, when it didn't really draw our attention last week. It points out that from the Deuteronomist's perspective, from the perspective of the school that creates the book of Deuteronomy and associated prophetic books, it really does point out you are getting this stuff from Yahweh, not because you deserve any of it, but you're less wicked. But it really does point out, Israelites, you have a lot of sins that you commit to. So it's not a think yourself very special. It's there was a promise made to your ancestors. That promise is being fulfilled. I decided to do this. I being Yahweh, I decided to do this. Not, you deserve it. You don't deserve it. You did all kinds of bad things in the wilderness. And this is Moses speaking to people, presumably representing Yahweh in Moses' role. There's an interesting phrase that is used. It is an instruction to circumcise your heart. The idea being, your hearts are hard, your sinners, circumcise your heart, and you'll see a better way to be. And importantly for the development of Jewish liturgy, last Torah portion, Va'etchanan, we talked about how the actual line of the Shema plus the first paragraph, the Ve'ahavta, are in that Torah portion. In this Torah portion, we actually end with the second paragraph of the Shema. So the Shema actually has 3 paragraphs. 2 of them are from Deuteronomy. Another one is from Numbers. The one from Numbers is about tzitzit, the fringes on prayer shawls. And the tzitzit are supposed to be a reminder of all of the other commandments. This paragraph, the second paragraph from the Shema that appears in Parshat Eikev, is conveying the consequences for when you don't follow the commandments. And the consequences are made very stark, very clear. If you follow the commandments, you will prosper in the land that you are going into. Not you individually, but you as a community. You Israelites, follow the rules and you will prosper. Also, you Israelites, don't follow the rules and you will suffer and you'll be ejected from the land. This particular putting together of the stakes, follow the rules and you get to stay, don't follow the rules and you'll leave, causes biblical scholars to try to date this very often after the beginning of the Babylonian exile, so after 586 BCE, because it reflects some level of knowledge that, oh yes, we were ejected from the land. So very often biblical scholars, when dating texts, will say, what does the text seem to know? It probably didn't know it in advance. What it's probably doing is taking knowledge that it has in retrospect and applying it and making it seem as though it came from before the events happened in order to illustrate the consequences and to express the theology. We have to kind of remember, when we're dealing with biblical texts, most biblical texts, and definitely Israelite biblical texts, the stuff that we find in the Tanakh, in the Jewish Bible, these are not systematic presentations of ideas most of the time. They get their ideas across through narrative. And when you get your ideas across through narrative, the way you get some of these ideas across is you take things that have happened in the past and explain them, and very often put them in the words of somebody from the past. We tend to think of this in modern period as either writing fiction, or we tend to think of it as projecting back and putting things into people's mouths dishonestly. That's not the intent that these authors have. The intent these authors have is to convey their theology. Over time, readers who inherited these texts began to view what they saw as being historically accurate for the time. It's a different question, but it's characteristic of most biblical texts that very often something is projected onto the past from a standpoint where other facts are known. In some cases, we're actually able to use this kind of technique to date within a couple of years when a text was written. So very specifically, the book of Daniel has apocalyptic visions in it, and based on certain of the visions, we can date the book of Daniel to between 167 BCE and 163, because its history starts to go wrong after a certain point. Maybe someday we'll do a video discussing how that all works. But this is Vayet Hanan, or this was the prior week was Vayet Hanan, and this is Eikev.